Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling, and it is official. Yes, former AEW World Champion Jon Moxley is back. He will be making his long-awaited return to AEW for the first time in nearly 3 months tonight on Dynamite live on TBS. AEW made the announcement yesterday that Mox is back. His AEW return is now official. As I mentioned, AEW announced yesterday on social media that Jon Moxley will make his return on this week's Dynamite on TBS, which will air live from the Entertainment and Sports Arena in Washington, D.C. They tweeted out the following message, quote, Jon Moxley is back. Appearing for the first time in nearly 3 months, the former AEW World Champion Jon Moxley makes his long-awaited return to AEW Dynamite tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, live on TBS. Now, of course, Moxley has been away from pro wrestling since early November after entering himself into treatment for alcohol use. Now, Moxley has not wrestled since defeating Jimmy Jacobs in a street fight at TWR's Tales from the Ring 4 event on October 30th, and he's not been on TV or pay-per-view since the October 27 edition of AEW Dynamite, where he defeated 10 of the Dark Order in a match for the AEW World Title Eliminator Tournament. Of course, it was rumored that he would be facing Bryan Danielson in the finals of said tournament at Full Gear in November, but of course that didn't happen since he was checking himself into treatment for alcohol use. Now, GCW, of course, announced this week as well that Moxley will return to the ring this Sunday, January 23rd, at their World on GCW pay-per-view from the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City. He'll be defending the GCW World Championship at that event against Homicide. Now, of course, once we get more news and what's actually Dynamite happens tonight, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about Moxley, what the plans are, etc. But obviously, first of all, it's great. Great to see Moxley back. I won't say it was a total surprise because I think a lot of people had seen the logic that he was probably going to return tonight on Dynamite. It's just a case of whether they announced it or not, because as I mentioned, once GCW, they didn't spoil anything, I would say, because they have to announce and promote their event this weekend, and it's their biggest ever show, Hammerstein Ballroom, New York City. I mean, it's a mecca for pro wrestling, isn't it? So of course they have to promote and announce that event, and he is the GCW World Champion. So once that announcement was made, I think everyone was working with the assumption anyway that Moxley's first public appearance, pro wrestling appearance, it was always going to be in AEW. So once GCW made that announcement that he would be defending the World Championship at the Hammerstein Ballroom, everyone went, well, okay, then he's going to be at Dynamite on Wednesday. It's just a case of whether they announce it or not, because Jon Moxley's first public pro wrestling appearance is not going to be in GCW. When he signed the contract with AEW, of course, it allows him to work New Japan, to work GCW, to work Indies, all that kind of stuff. But like with any pro wrestling contract, especially these major ones, AEW has the priority. And I'm sure that they probably worked that out with Moxley, you know. Yeah, okay, we don't have an issue with working all of these shows, all that kind of stuff, but we want priority over your bookings, and that's what they have. So he was always going to make his first public appearance in AEW. So it's a stacked show. It really is a stacked show tonight for Dynamite on TBS. As I mentioned, you've got Moxley's return after the 3-month hiatus. You've got CM Punk's huge, not that huge, match with Shawn Spears, which of course he will win, but it furthers the MJF feud. I'm interested to see how they continue it, because obviously that Wardlow match last week was quite polarizing in terms of the finish and how much Punk gave, and Punk still winning and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how they lay this one out. Again, I would have the complete opposite. I'd have Punk beat him in like 30 seconds, because who cares? But I think they'll probably stretch out a bit longer. It is a pro wrestling program, of course. We've also got Serena Deeb versus Sky Blue. Of course, Deeb attacked Hikaru Shida last week, so I'm sure they'll continue that. We've got FTR facing Brock Anderson and Lee Johnson. They shot the angle backstage last week for that. FTR is going to win, but it's interesting to have FTR basically saying, look, we've got Tully as the manager, but you know, Arn, why don't you get involved in this as well? Maybe eventually going back to this idea of having a version of the Four Horsemen in AEW. What that would look like, I don't know. Is the Pinnacle still a thing, even though they're kind of not, but that's cool. You've got Sting and Darby Allin teaming up once again against the Acclaimed. Of course, the Acclaimed are the number 1 ranked tag team. I think Sting and Darby get the win, and they're the next challengers for the tag team championships. I think it's interesting to potentially have a Sting and Darby Allin versus Jurassic Express match. When that would be, I don't know. Of course, we've got Revolution at the beginning of March. it's always a case with anything of, can you stretch it out that long? I'm sure they probably can. But I could possibly also see that tag team match maybe happening at Beach Break as well. And that's maybe where they would do the title change. Because I think Sting and Darby's first loss, I don't think is against Jurassic Express. I think they might build to a Sting and Darby versus Young Bucks, or Sting and Darby versus someone else. So I think Sting and Darby get the win tonight. Of course, you've also got AEW TNT champion Cody Rhodes making his return. We won't go into too much detail now because we'll talk about him in a second. We've also got that mixed tag team match that was set up last week. Adam Cole and women's champion Britt Baker versus Orange Cassidy and Chris Statlander. And also you've got the in-ring debut of Brody King in AEW 2 as he teams up with Malachi Black to face the Varsity Blondes. I think that match is going to feature a heel turn as well. I think that's when Julia Hart aligns herself with the House of Black, or Kings of the Black Throne, or whatever they're calling themselves. Julia Hart, as you saw on AEW Dark last night, is still sporting the eye patch. My theory is that under the eye patch, she has the similar contact lens and the face paint that Malachi Black also has. I think that's kind of what they're going with, and I think it's probably the right move. I think there is potential there, certainly in Julia Hart, and I like the idea because we saw it with Brody King. Malachi Black did the black mist into the face of Brody King in the vignettes, and that kind of inducted him into the House of Black, and I think they'll do a similar thing with Julia Hart as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if Julia Hart's the heel turn happens tonight. She's been acting differently the last couple of weeks too. She stopped the Varsity Blondes actually attacking Malachi Black last week before Brody King came out. So I think the Varsity Blondes get cost the match tonight by Julia Hart, who takes the eye patch off and reveals she has the contact lens and the sort of spreading face paint that Malachi Black has. And I think that would be a good segment. So it's a stacked show. I think last week some people felt they were a bit underwhelmed by Dynamite, and maybe that's fair. But there's a lot going on this week. Again, Moxley, Punk, obviously Sting and Darby always tagging up as always an event. Obviously the Cody Rhodes news too. Obviously Adam Cole and Britt Baker teaming up for the first time, and then a possible heel turn and Brody King's in-ring debut. So there's plenty going on tonight. It's a very exciting Dynamite on TBS. Now, I said we're going to talk about Cody Rhodes. We have to. Obviously we spoke about him a lot the other day when it came to his status with AEW and his contract expiring. Cody Rhodes is still technically a free agent. It's led to a lot of people saying, well, okay, he's a free agent, but he's an EVP, so would this contract be different? Like, what's the situation with that? And make no mistake, Cody Rhodes has said before, he ain't leaving AEW. He will sign with AEW. I'm sure it's a negotiating process. I wouldn't even be surprised if they're trying to work the sheets. You know, Cody Rhodes is this polarizing figure. How do we make him more polarizing, and how do we hype up his appearance tonight? People are fascinated as to what's going to happen, and they've been playing it up. Just mere minutes after the story broke a couple of days ago, they were posting all about it on social media, AEW, going, Cody Rhodes returns, and Cody's been teasing stuff, and they've been, I think they're working a lot of people, to be honest. But either way, it's led to a lot of people questioning his status as an EVP. As I mentioned before, the EVPs at this point are EVPs in name only. They have no control over creative. That's been Tony Khan since the end of 2019, since he pulled the reins in, and he controls all of that. They might have higher status in the company, but again, they're EVPs by name only. So AEW TNT champion Cody Rhodes is reportedly not under an executive vice president contract with the company. As I mentioned previously, it was revealed by Fightful Select that Rhodes' AEW contract expired at the end of 2021, and he's been working technically as a free agent ever since then. Now, Rhodes' status as a free agent has been known by many within AEW for several weeks at this point. But an update, as I mentioned, there's been lots of speculation on Rhodes' status as an AEW EVP ever since the contract status update was revealed a couple of days ago, and if there's a separate contract for his EVP duties. But Fightful has reported that Rhodes is not actually under any contract with AEW right now. EVP, talent, whatever you name it. This is what the source said when speaking to Fightful, quote, he's a free agent with no contract with AEW at the moment. Now, there's still no word on when Rhodes is expected to sign a new AEW contract. Of course, if he does, we'll keep you updated. Now, when it comes to Rhodes' status for Dynamite as well, as I mentioned, he is going to be on the show. This has led to a lot of speculation, as I mentioned, regarding his future, whether he will be in AEW or not. On the latest edition of the Wrestling Observer radio show, Meltzer noted that Cody Rhodes will not be in the Royal Rumble later on this month. We spoke about this yesterday, with no AEW stars expected to be in the Rumble. His name had been brought up in speculation of a potential surprise entrant when this news broke. WWE is reportedly hoping to bring someone through the forbidden door in the men's Rumble, similar to what they've done with Mickie James on the women's side of things. However, Meltzer noted that no AEW talents will be appearing in this match. As I mentioned, Cody Rhodes is going to be on Dynamite tonight. He's yet to appear on AEW television this year, but Meltzer noted that he is going to be on AEW Dynamite on Wednesday. While he hasn't physically appeared yet, Cody did travel to Newark 2 weeks ago to be involved with the Dynamite taping. However, due to a family medical issue, he had to go home that day. Because of that, it's possible he was unable to physically sign his contract in Newark, and he could just be signing it tomorrow, the first time he'll physically be at an AEW event to do so this year. I find that difficult, that sort of narrative, because there are these things that are called, the internet. You could certainly sign one and send it back or scan it back or whatever. Maybe you might need a notary. I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I wouldn't be surprised if, given the speculation and given the buzz that this story created this week, I wouldn't be surprised if Cody came out and signed a contract in the middle of the ring. Why not? I mean, it would make perfect sense. Talk about working current situations into the angle. I could absolutely see them doing something like that, and maybe that's what they'll do. Maybe that he'll work it into a promo. Maybe he's workshopped that promo as well and focus group the promo, going, what if I sort of talk about the contract rumors and saying, I'm not going to sign until I get what I want, or this, that, and the other. There could be something there. They could do something with that. Absolutely. I think if anything, thinking about it even more, it'd be maybe slightly naive if he didn't do that. If he came out and doesn't address anything and turn it into an angle. I know I sound like Vince Russo there, but why not? Why not turn it into an angle? But it sounds, if anything, like I said, it might be a good thing to do. Let's change gears here and talk about Peter Avalon. Talk about a shift in tone. Go from Cody Rhodes to Peter Avalon. But there had been recent suggestions that Peter Avalon was leaving AEW. But this is not the case. Peter Avalon is not leaving AEW, despite recent suggestions that his status with the company was changing. The clarification came from Leva Bates when she responded to a question on Twitter on Monday about whether Avalon had departed AEW. She tweeted, quote, no, he's still here, just adding indie dates. Now, of course, earlier on in the day, Peter Avalon tweeted that he is now taking bookings for all indie dates and appearances, and his career status is hashtag let's effing go. This is what he said, quote, announcement, my career status, LFG, let's effing go. The patriarch of the wingmen, the librarian, professional, producer, Pretty Peter Avalon is available for all independent dates and appearances. Book the AEW original, Dynamite since day one, any date, anytime, any place. Now, Avalon has already been announced for the Lucha Vavoom events on Friday, February 11th and Saturday, February 12th in Los Angeles. He's also booked for the Epic Pro Wrestling events on Saturday, May 21st. Now, Avalon did work the tapings for AEW Dark in Orlando, Florida over the past weekend. Peter Avalon, of course, made his debut for AEW at the Fight for the Fallen event in July 2019. He lost to Sonny Kiss in a Dark match. Since then, Avalon has worked matches on Dynamite, Dark Elevation. Avalon has continued to work independent dates during his time with AEW. I think some people had assumed he was leaving because, again, we're getting to this stage at this point with these original AEW contracts where they're up, and some people aren't being re-signed. And this is AEW's version of releasing people. Tony Khan has said several times that basically he's not interested in releasing people in the way that WWE is. He's just going to let their contract expire and cycle new people in. That's, if anything, that's why he's building up the roster so much, is because this year actually quite a few people are going to go. It's just their way of doing it, and I think people had assumed that Peter Avalon would probably be the same case. We don't know if he's re-signed. We don't know if he's planning on leaving, if eventually his contract is going to be re-signed and picked up or not. We just ultimately don't know. As of right now, he's still technically with AEW, but he's just adding independent dates. Finally, Eddie Kingston, unfortunately, looks to be suffering with an injury and might be facing some time on the shelf. It appears Eddie Kingston will be taking a break from in-ring action due to an injury. According to PW Insider, AEW President Tony Khan announced that Kingston was injured this past weekend at AEW's Dark tapings at Universal Studios in Florida. Sources say that Kingston will miss a few weeks of action. The news indicates that Kingston will not be appearing at GCW's The World on GCW event this Sunday for the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York. Now, in an update, Wrestling Inc. actually reached out to GCW and has confirmed that Kingston will not be wrestling on the show. Kingston had previously been called out by GCW star AJ Gray, easy for me to say, for a potential match on the show. In an interview with Andrew Thompson, Kingston said he would have to check with AEW and also be medically cleared for the event, but otherwise would accept the challenge. So it looks like he's not going to be, well, he isn't going to be wrestling for GCW. When it comes to television, of course, Eddie Kingston's been involved in a program with Chris Jericho and the Inner Circle as common enemies of Daniel Garcia and 2.0. Tension has continued to rise between Kingston and Jericho. They had a segment backstage and they ended the show last week with the Jericho-Kingston stuff. Obviously, I think we're going towards Kingston versus Jericho or Jericho and Kingston versus 2.0. I don't know whether I think it's Kingston and Jericho. I will be honest and say the feud's not really doing that much for me. But that's because I think just the Jericho stuff just isn't doing much for me at the moment. I think the Inner Circle might need to break up. I think the Inner Circle's done everything they need to do. And I think Jericho, it's strange because Jericho, obviously 2019, he had completely reinvented himself and he was AEW and he was the focal point of the show, and it just feels like there just hasn't been much of an evolution since then, and he's looking for his next cycle of whatever that is, whether it was, and he knows this as well because in obviously 2016 and 17, he had the list of Jericho and all those catchphrases, and WWE left. And then you have sort of the New Japan version of Jericho, which was great. And then you have the beginning AEW version of Jericho with a little bit of the bubbly and all this kind of stuff. And he was super, super over. And it kind of just feels like since then, we haven't sort of got, the Chris Jericho, a new version of Jericho. What that version will be, I don't know. Kingston, I think, is just awesome. He's one of my favorite guys in AEW, so hopefully he recovers soon. But anyway, guys, let me know your thoughts on today's AEW news stories. Be sure to smash a like on the like button, and be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner as well. And I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Peace.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.